Good evening and welcome to another Northshire Presents virtual event. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rachel Person, event manager for Northshire Bookstore in Saratoga Springs, New York, here with my good friend and colleague, David Wood, event manager for Northshire Bookstore in Manchester Center, Vermont. Before we get started, a couple of very quick notes. First of all, please use the Q&A box that you'll find at the bottom of your screen to pose any questions that you have this evening. You can ask questions at any time. We will save them up and pose them for you at the end of the evening. So please make liberal use of that Q&A box. And then before we get started, a note of thanks. Independent bookselling is a tough business, and we couldn't do it without your incredible loyalty and support. So thank you so much for being here tonight, and thank you for your support of independent bookselling. David, why don't you take it away with introducing our guest tonight?
Thank you so much, Rachel. It is my great pleasure to introduce Christopher McDougall and Eric Orton for their new book, Born to Run 2, The Ultimate Training Guide. Christopher McDougall has covered wars in Rwanda and Angola as a foreign correspondent for the Associated Press before writing his best-selling book, Born to Run. His fascination with the limits of human potential led to his next works, Running with Sherman. Both of these titles are Northshire staff favorites, and Natural Born Heroes, and his Outside magazine web series, Art of the Hero. Eric Orton's experiences with the Terra Humara and his study of running, human performance, strength, and conditioning have led him to the cutting edge of the sport and made him a go-to for athletes everywhere. The author of The Cool Impossible and former fitness director for the University of Colorado Health Sciences Center, Orton personally trains athletes from recreational racers to elite ultramarathoners. Born to Run 2 has been praised as a practical guide that stresses the fundamentals of food, fitness, form, focus, footwear, fun, and family, with the emphasis on learning to run well. While best-selling author and renowned coach duo of McDougall and Orton have been called captivating storytellers and steadfast advocates of the joy of running. Please join me in welcoming to Northshire, Christopher McDougall and Eric Orton.
Thanks, sir.
Right from the get-go, I am very impressed, David, that you got the free 7, because Eric and I, off the top of our head, we always like miss one, and you just rattled them off like you've been doing it all day.
I took notes, so I have them. It's always fun to remember them, though.
Yeah, right, exactly. It kind of centers you. But, let's talk a little bit about Northshire Books, Eric, because you haven't been there before, have you?
No. Tell me about it.
So, the Running with Sherman tour, we had a good friend who lives in Greenwich, upstate New York. And because we're going to be visiting her, and I got another friend, my friend Zeke Cook, his dad lives in Troy. And then when Northshire reached out, said, hey, do you want to come do an event? Like, wow, I don't know, man, Saratoga Springs, that's really up there. It's a long drive. It's more kind of your family territory than mine. And I distinctly remember, I'd never been there before. I'd never been to Saratoga Springs before. I roll into town, I walk into this bookstore, and it's 2 floors, and it's vibrant, and it's active, and people are coming and going. And then we walk into the event space, and it's already full of people. It feels very clubby. It's like walking into a clubhouse group of people who all know each other, and they're chatting and excited. And I had that feeling of like when you're a kid and your parents bring you to the library and you get it, it becomes like your place. Anyway, I go on for quite a while. It was one of those special events where I've just felt this family allegiance to Northshire Books ever since. And the fact is, the reason you and I are talking is because they made this happen, Yep. No online sellers doing this, but they are. So I hope you guys, if you're going to buy Born to Run 2, and you really should, because it's awesome, but get it from Northshire Books. And we're going to be sending out signed autographed book plates, so you can get an autographed copy of Born to Run 2 right there at Northshire Books. You can't order it online for other places. Go there, get it. And, dude, honestly, listen, if someone had given you that as a Christmas gift, a couple of years ago, an Ultimate Training Guide with an autograph inside, you'd have been stoked, right?
Oh, absolutely. You would have been stoked 14 years ago.
Oh man, I would have been talking to you if this book existed.
Right.
we never would have worked together.
That's right.
Yeah. Hey, so before we get into the book, I got to tell you something that 2 minutes ago made me bang my face against a wall.
Uh-oh.
So do you get the New York Times?
I don't.
Okay. Well, I often will read the health section. I kind of hate read it. I read it to see what's going to make me angry that day, because particularly when it comes to fitness and exercise, it's always the same thing. It's always either the old stuff that never worked and they just keep retreading it, or it's the new study that shows something, but we're still not sure. And we need additional studies. And like, well, what's the point of telling me then? It's like this clickbait stuff. But today it's on plantar fasciitis.
Oh
And
no.
I started to read it, dude. I'm just like, oh my God, the same garbage that's been around for 40 years. No one's quite sure what causes plantar fasciitis. Doctors believe it's an inflammation of the plantar fascia. And you know what the advice is, dude? Never go barefoot. Get sturdy shoes. Change the shoes every 300 miles or 6 months. And you know who created that metric? The shoe companies. That's not
Right.
based on anything. The shoe
Right.
companies say, hey, you know what? Every 6 months we get a new shoe to come out. Better tell people we recommend that they change their shoes.
Did they
And
did they also say about orthotics?
no orthotics.
No orthotics. Okay.
No orthotics. They didn't get into orthotics. They did recommend lots of rest and ice.
Yeah. Just
And I'm
make
like,
it more tight.
Yeah, make it tighter, immobilize it, and do
Right.
nothing. What's
Right.
our advice? Do nothing. Maybe buy some shoes, but otherwise do nothing. Yeah, dude. So I read this. I'm like, thank God a couple of heroes came along to save the day.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh
So,
wow.
Born to Run 2, man. What's this book all about?
Wow, it's I think it's about you spearheading this hope that everybody can run for fun and joy and put everything together and make running, take it in any direction that you want to take it. And I think that's what I'm most excited about is how you started this book. It was about you, because next to Caballo Blanco in Born to Run, I feel you are the most important person in that book, because I hear from so many people, it's like, I'm just like Chris, and he gave me hope that I can run, that I can do an ultra marathon, or I can do this or that. And you're the running proof here 14 years later that you're a better runner now than you were then, and you were a pretty darn good runner then.
Yeah.
So I'm
ahead.
always going to come from it from a coaching standpoint, and I think that's where you and I have a good combo of how we can attack who and this is for.
And it's a really interesting thing you're saying, because I never saw myself as being a figure in the book at all. The original Born to Run, I came at it as a news correspondent journalist. And the one word you do not use in that kind of writing is the letter I. You do not use that first person pronoun. And especially in that scenario, I'm with you and Barefoot Ted and Scott Jorick and Jen and all these outsized characters. And there are two kinds of people in Born to Run. Either extremely knowledgeable people who had lots of wisdom to impart, or absolute bigger than life maniacs like Barefoot Ted and Jen and Caballo. And so when I wrote my first draft, I was invisible. I was not even in the book. And my editor said, well, where's you? Where's your story? I said, dude, I'm the least interesting guy down there. You don't want to, I'm just going to clutter things up. And he goes, no, people need someone that they can identify with. And it is kind of coincidental that truly was the origin of the story. Was I go down, I learn about this reclusive tribe. They don't want to talk to me. And I hear about this guy called Caballo Blanco, the white horse. And I meet this guy, and it's kind of like looking at the ghost of Christmas future. This guy's my same height. He was my same age when he first went down there. He was also suffering from running injuries. He's my same shoe size. And in a way, I'm looking at this guy like, oh, wow, like if this dude could transform himself, now he's just scampering around doing 50-mile runs in sandals, maybe I could too. So in a way, that truly was the story. The thing that people latched onto was the heart of the story, how these two guys kind of found their way forward.
Yeah. And going back to your question of what this book is about, from my perspective, in the people that I heard from Born to Run, was that feeling of hope, that you gave them hope that they could do what they want to be able to do with running, or maybe didn't even think was possible for them. And that's what this book is chocked full of. We shoveled all this information into these chapters with your brilliant stories to not take people from that hope to now here's how to put it together and run with it.
Yeah. Here's a thing I think is kind of interesting too. So, I came into this, I'm still, in my mind, I'm still a scrabbly freelance writer, that I lived for a long time, scratching out a living, going check to check as a news reporter, freelance news writer, and then freelance magazine journalist. And so when you're a freelancer, you're always scanning the landscape for what isn't there. If everybody's doing this, who's doing that? And if nobody's doing that, that's where you go. So I'm always looking for the story that nobody else had. And when I was a struggling ex-runner, I kind of busted down and I'd go to the bookstore and the library and look for running books, and there's kind of nothing there, It was the same old stuff that had been around for 30 years. And the bookshelf, the running bookshelf was really thin. There's almost nothing on the shelf. And then Ultra Marathon Man comes along, and it's a really cool, adventurous story, but it was only about one guy. There's only one dude in it. So I really liked Ultra Marathon Man, but I didn't really learn much about ultra marathoners. I learned about an ultra marathoner, one guy. And I saw, hey, there's an opportunity here. And the second opportunity is that all of Dean's stories have to do with how painful ultra running is. He's like crawling along the course, and his toenails are falling off, and he's, pooping his pants and the rest of this stuff. Everything that's very unpleasant about running. And to me, that kind of fed into the same drumbeat we've always been hearing about running. It's painful. It's going to hurt. It's bad for your knees. Marathon is the ultimate challenge. Philippides died. And I'm like, that's not what I'm seeing. I'm seeing people are actually having fun, like actually having a good time. So I saw an opportunity. Let's do a book for Born to Run that shows the adventure that lots of people are having. And then for Born to Run 2, I was looking around for the training guide that really addressed stuff like, hey man, how do you train with a baby jogger? How do you run well with your dog? How do you run with your spouse? What do you do about plantar fasciitis that doesn't repeat the same old garbage that they've been saying forever? And to me, I saw an opportunity. There's so much about running that people just ignore.
Yeah, there's so much there. I mean, I just, something came to me, and this is going to completely change the conversation, but we'll come back to that. So we talk about how when we started Born to Run 2, our first plan of attack was to have pictures done because we wanted this to be a picture book, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So with everything you just said, and that also took a course where we didn't see the book going originally, right?
Yeah.
Was there a moment for Born to Run with you that it completely took a different direction than you originally had in mind?
Yes. And it had to do with stuff. I'll tell you, writing that book was a real journey because, I was used to doing magazine stories that are about 2,000 words. And suddenly you have a book that's 100,000 words. And so that's a very distant point on the landscape to try to reach, That's way out there across the ocean, and you got to write your way there. I didn't know how to navigate myself. And so I tried to do what I did with the magazine story, which is try to find the most fascinating story. So I tried to open the book up where the moment when Jen and Billy get lost in the canyon. But then there's way too much backstory. Then I got to explain, well, who are they? And what canyon are we in? And who are the Talamana? Who am I? Who's Caballo? So I got rid of that and I started over again. And this time I told the story, what I wanted to do was start to reflect all these other fascinating stories that I'd come across that I'd never heard before, like Emil Zatopek. Okay. So Emil Zatopek, I had dimly heard about this guy from Czechoslovakia who had won 3 gold medals in the same Olympics in the distance events. And no one's ever done it before. I was aware of him. And when I started to work on Born to Run, this time I tried to tell the story about, let's make this an adventure story, but also folds in all these great moments of history. And what really changed things for me was discovering that not only were these great, interesting moments of the history of running, but they actually all fit the same theme, So I wanted to write about Zatopek. Well, it turns out Zatopek was like the patron saint of joyful running. That's what he was known for, the friendliest guy around. Super competitive, but considered a real friend and a laugher and a joker. He's the guy, he invented one way of training was by putting his dirty laundry in a bathtub and filling it with water and soap and just running in place in a bathtub. It's actually a fantastically effective way to learn running for him. He said his wife was a field event person. She was a javelin thrower and a disc, what do you call it? Shot putter. And she was a sturdy woman. And Emil would like put her on his shoulders and go run through the snow as a way of training. They would throw javelins at each other and try to catch them in midair. So I read this and like, oh, this is exactly what we're talking about. And so that's the thing I didn't expect. I thought that Double Mata and this race were a one-time occurrence. And what I discovered is no, actually, the same sense of fun and vitality exists throughout the history of competitive running, if you're willing to look for it.
Well, and that's the reason I asked that question, because that's what I'm so excited about with Born to Run 2, because you did that same thing. All these supportive stories that are so fun to read on their own, but then support what we're talking about in every chapter. And I think that's the genius and the uniqueness that you wanted to achieve that you did with this book.
Thank you. I love those words: genius, uniqueness, brilliance. I like that. Yeah, I'm gonna find more opportunities for you to say those things. Well, here's an example. We knew we wanted a lot of authentic looking people represented in this book. We didn't want the same Lululemon models that we're always saying. We wanted to see people of color, people of gender fluid people with prosthetics running with their dogs. And so we gathered this group for this photo shoot. And one of the people who turned up was Zach Friedley, whom we never met before. And I did not know where Zach's story was going. Zach is an adaptive runner who runs on a blade. And our friend Luis Escobar, who, you want to talk about brilliant. I mean, the photos this guy gets,
yeah,
it's just amazing. The photos Luis got that weekend was just insanely good. And so here's Zach, and I thought we were going to be talking to a guy who was going to be telling us about running with a prosthetic. Turns out his whole story is so much more interesting and so much vaster than that I never intended to be in the book, but it was irresistible. And it became an entryway, I think, for a lot of runners who've been told, well, running's not for you, or, maybe you should think about this, or you're going to get hurt. Anybody who's ever felt that maybe they're not a runner, you read Zach's story and you got to rethink that whole idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it goes back to that, our cliche is it's for everybody and everybody. And Zach, now I'm coaching Zach, and it's going to be fun to see his transformation of, kind of short trail guy to all these longer races. And it's going to be fun to follow him along. And now people can read his story and follow along with us.
Yeah. And I love how the whole story has now gathered a new episode. So, to refresh people's memory, I had heard about the Tarahumara in the Copper Canyon. I went down and spent time with them and met Micah True and was sort of enchanted by the idea that, hey, maybe I can learn to run like these people who are running 80 years old and running 200 miles in sandals. I met you. You offered to coach me and train me for this race, which I felt was impossible. And the way you did it was not by adding volume, but by adding smartness, teaching me how to run smart, how to learn how to sprint again and how to get back in touch with my feet. We get out for this race in which you and I thought we'd be the only ones there. And, Lewis rolls into town and Scott Jorick and Jen and Billy. We have this race and it becomes Born to Run. Subsequently, the people who were down there really remained close together, closely knit. And one of them is Lewis. And so Lewis created the Born to Run extravaganza, which is his wacky ass wild festival in the Santa Barbara Mountains where there's a bunch of trail races. And that's where he met Zach. And together they created Born to Adapt. And this is now the first race, open race for basically anybody, any way you move your body. If you're on crutches, you're on a blade, you're in a wheelchair, you're on two legs, whatever it is, you can jump into this race, the Born to Adapt race. And I love the fact that this whole journey, which began with one guy, me, then meeting Caballo, then meeting you, then Lewis, and it has grown and grown and grown. And now that circle, that Born to Run family, has grown into the Born to Adapt race.
Yeah, and I really think that's what it's all about, is that how all the great thing that's come from Born to Run and Born to Run 2 is those chance meetings, and it's starting for one reason but leading to many bigger reasons, and it just creates an authentic feel that is just so cool to be part of. So
that sort of touches on two of the aspects of the book. People like to look at the footwear sections, the running shoe sections, as the most controversial. To me, that argument's over and done with, man. There's no argument. Anything that allows you to sense the ground is better. Anything that creates mush where your feet are cut off is worse, period. So to me, the real controversial chapters are family and fun. And I think so many people have felt that those two things are the opposite of what running is supposed to be, and which is so sad and unfortunate. But I always feel like we discredit ourselves by putting those two chapters in the book, although to me they were absolutely vital.
yeah, and I always go back to that word fun, and it speaks to every chapter, whether it's the food section or the form section or the running and the strength skills. Everything that people are learning goes back into the overriding aspect of, this is going to provide more joy and more fun for your running, for you to use it in any way you want to do it. So I think that word fun is maybe the most important word that's thrown around in this book.
Yeah, I think unfortunately most people feel that their running should be pointing them toward pain.
Right.
That if they're feeling sore, then they ran hard enough. If their knees hurt, well, that's what happens when you run. That if you get a side stitch, well, that means you're going hard. And so their runs every day are progressing more and more and more toward pain. And the closer they get to pain, the more they think they're doing it right. And we're saying the opposite, that pain should be your starting point. And the more and more you become comfortable and it feels like fun, that's when you're getting closer to your goal, which means that pain plays a role. Pain is there to tell you, oh, there are things here to correct. That if you have plantar fasciitis, don't rest, but address the behavior that's causing it. If you, anything that is associated with pain, at some point, you're going to want to not do it. And so, but the pain is there to show you, hey, you know what? Your running form is off. Your fitness is not where it should be. Your diet needs to be dialed in. That's why you're feeling sluggish in the afternoons. Dial those things in and you'll start to progress toward the fun part, which makes you want to keep on doing it.
Well, and I remember our first conversation about this book when you called, and all I needed to hear was you to say, hey, running is a craft and a form of martial art. And I'm like, that's it. And if we see this as a craft, and you're the perfect example of just getting better year to year to year and progressing as we get older and feeling better as we get older, feeling better as we run longer. What a concept. It creates all the good thinking in our brain for us to think big things. And from a coaching standpoint, that's what I look at, is like, how can you challenge yourself in a good way, in a fun way?
Yeah, and I think that's what's been lost for sure. And I think as a coach, what it must be a little bit frustrating for you is that, when people learn other arts, when they learn dance or music or a martial art, the goal is to get more elegant and more refined at the craft. It's not about volume or speed. That comes at the end. It's what I always said. First, focus on easy, because if that's all you get, that ain't so bad. Then work on light, then smooth, and then the fast will come. But so much of running is all about speed and volume right from the get-go. If you start to run, well, how fast can you go? Can you keep up with people? How far can you go? And to dial it back to focus on the fine art and the craft, to me, is so gratifying. So, one thing too about the whole idea of minimalist running, barefoot running, is people feel like that's the goal. That's what you want to do. I'm like, no, that's just whether you want to or not. The goal is to run lightly and well. But the byproduct of that is, if you're running lightly and well, you can wear whatever you want. And so I was telling you that out here where we live now in Hawaii, I had this run I do where I kind of run down the beach and then I swim across this canal and then pop out the other side and then run on the roads. And I started doing it in shoes. I did it in shoes for a while. And then just one day I realized, let me just try barefoot. And now I just do it completely barefoot. The goal was not to run barefoot, but it just, now that my form is dialed in, I can either wear shoes or not wear shoes, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And for me, that's the best answer, is like running naturally takes place because you want more of that feeling. You get that good feeling, and through time you want more and more of it. And it's not that we're rejecting the bigger shoes, but you want that feeling. I want that natural feeling. And so that's for me, it's a continual seeking out that feeling. That I don't know. I just, again, for me, it doesn't have to be this all or nothing approach, but once you experience natural running, you want more of it, and you're going to find a way to do that in your own way.
Well, the key word you said was feeling.
Yeah.
And you've always said athleticism is awareness. Awareness is feeling things and understanding what they mean. And they're always throwing that cliche around. Listen to your body. Well, your body's sending you all kinds of mixed messages. My body right now is telling me it wants some Haagen-Dazs and it wants it urgently. Maybe that's a message I should not listen to. The difficulty is, we have Stone Age bodies that were created in prehistory, when storing a lot of fat was a life or death situation, when conserving energy at all costs was life or death. But now we live in a modern era where we don't want to store fat. Our body does, because it still responds to the sense of hey, you know what? There's going to be a long, cold Arctic winter coming, and we don't have heat. We better have a lot of adipose fat around our bodies, or we're dead. Knowing that come summer, that fat will disappear. But we don't have that same mechanism now. We don't have to go out and hunt our food and fight it and murder it. We just push a button on the magic rectangle and food shows up at the door. So what we were really striving for is to regain a sense of feeling, of understanding when we eat a certain kind of food, how our body's going to feel and respond. When you wear a certain kind of shoe, how your body's going to respond and feel. When you want to figure out a pace without having to look at a watch or a heart rate monitor, but to actually understand by your own breathing what your pace is, that's huge information.
Yeah. And it just goes back to that awareness thing, is that we're stripping everything back, not for the sake of stripping things back, but for the sake of creating that efficiency and that easy feeling and of what it feels like to do things right and well. And I think that's what's missed with a lot of the shoe talk, a lot of the studies, that you can't measure what it's like to run well and what that feeling is. You can't measure that until you experience it. And once you experience it, then like with the shoes, you want more of it. And I think that's the exciting part about this 90-day program, is that we're going to throw a lot at people for them to really strip things back and to really get in tune with their body and to feel what good can feel like.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we came up with. We didn't want to leave people hanging at the end of this book. Like, okay, now you've given us all this advice. Now what do I do? And so we tackled the free 7: food, form, fun, fitness, focus, footwear, and
Fun and family.
Fun and family. Yeah. We tackle the free 7, but at the end we have this 90-day program, and the challenge where you really came through, the challenge was finding what's a 90-day program that applies to everybody. We didn't want a book just for beginners or just for experienced or older or younger, male or female. And what we found was there's a meeting spot for all of them, which is that all of us at some point can do like our own personal retreat, our own little personal 90-day spa session, where we reboot, we get back in touch with form and focus and fitness. And that's what the 90-day program is. It starts off with the 2-week test, which has you strip out all those high glycemic foods from your diet and then slowly reintroduce them. So you understand, hey, when I eat a half a bagel, oh, that's why I feel like I need a shot of espresso in the afternoon. It's not because I was up late last night. It's because my blood sugar just spiked. But you wouldn't know that if you hadn't done the 2-week test.
Yeah. And I think, getting back to what you're saying about how do you design one program for everybody, is that, when you came to me to train for the Copper Canyon for Born to Run, I looked at you specifically and knew exactly what we needed to do. I had in my mind you as that athlete. And so for this book, I said, okay, what's the general population out there? What do they need? They need a factory reset to apply everything we've talked about. And so instead of seeing millions of people out there, I saw all those millions of people as one. And then it was easy to create one program that's going to benefit every type of runner out there.
That said, I like the fact that I feel that we were honest in our exploration, that we didn't come in as these like omniscient overlords with all the answer, because there are a couple of questions that we were a little bit like, we're not quite sure about this. And the big one, I think, to me was like running with music.
Right.
Yeah, it is massively popular. A lot of people will not go out the door without these AirPods in their stuck in their heads. You and I are in agreement. It's the dumbest goddamn thing anybody can do. But at the same time, we can't ignore the fact that really good runners run with music. If you're ever running a street marathon and you hit mile 15 and the band's out there and they're playing like the theme from Rocky or something, I guarantee you will run 1 minute faster per mile in front of that band than you did before. So we were out to see like, okay, how do we resolve this question?
Yeah. And it was, I don't know, you know how much I like music. So it was fun to be able to pull in a story about Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers and whether he uses music or not as he runs. And then ultimately the king guru of them all, Rick Rubin, for you to be able to have a conversation with the man who helped a lot of the bands I grew up with, to hear what he thought about running with music. And I don't know, that was just the cool part about writing this book with you, is like all these little tentacles that we could explore that you might not have thought of when we first, kind of going in, and how music played a big role in how we teach people to run in 5 minutes. We use music as a big part of that. We can teach you to run in 5 minutes, and, running or music is a big part of that. So, Well, you had the big find, which was finding Lady Southpaw. So you and I were debating this question. We're like, okay, what should we tell people about running with music? We think it's a dumbass idea, but people seem to enjoy it. Let's not be like Iranian dictators saying, thou shalt not listen to music. And so I knew that Flea, who is a musician, came out strongly, and a runner, a really solid marathoner, came out strongly against running with music. But then you found this woman named Lady Southpaw, who had created an entire album of music at 180 beats per minute, which she created for herself as a running playlist. So she wrote her own songs, which she then performed and sang, which she could then listen to while she ran the New York City Marathon. And so we reached out to her and said, hey, what do you think about this? And her response was so friggin' brilliant. The whole thing's in the book, like her written response, like, oh shit, this is like a Supreme Court argument, it's perfect. That's in. And then we were able to go to Rick Rubin to come in there for the tiebreaker. Yeah. And I think, that's a perfect example of maybe the overriding template of this book is that, we're not preaching. We're saying, hey, go out, experience this and decide for yourself. Feel what good form feels like. Feel what good leg stiffness feels like, and see how it feels, for your running. Go out and experiment with music. And is it a distraction for you, or is it a performance enhancement for you? You decide. Yeah.
But that's what we're doing too. We're not just kind of shrugging our shoulders. Yeah, we're giving people an orientation point, which is that if the element is actually helping contribute to your goal, like Lady Southpaw, for instance, she's not just cranking tunes. She created specific 180 beats per minute songs with a specific cadence. And so when she runs in the rhythm of that cadence, which is actually really pretty damn smart. So for her, the music is not a distraction. It's not something to sort of block out the sensation. It's actually something that she's using like a metronome to make her running rhythmic. And like you said, that ended up creating our legendary Nobel Prize nominated 5-minute rocks lobster running form fix.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, I see so many people that are looking to change their form, is that they keep trying to learn more, where in 5 minutes, we're going to show you what good form is. And then it's putting that practice into place. And I would recommend to listeners out there, any other sport, you say, hey, I'm going to go out and practice tennis today, or I'm going to go out and practice basketball, practice my free throw shoot. Start telling yourself, hey, I'm going to go out and go for a practice run today.
Yeah.
And see how it changes your mindset, and see how this can become an art form through your life.
Yeah. So the rock lobster fix we're talking about.
Yep.
There is a little illustration right there. That's my wife Mika in action. Hey, Navy. She's grimacing across the room right now. As you say, people sometimes they avalanche themselves with more and more information. They watch more and more YouTube videos and read more and more articles, and it becomes this overwhelming accumulation of knowledge and information, as opposed to a simple thing which you can feel. And what we wanted to do for Running Forum is, rather than overcomplicate it, drown people in rhetoric, just come up with 3 very simple prompts that are foolproof. And so Running Forum is about 2 things. It's about foot strike and cadence. How do I hit the ground? How often do I hit the ground? That's it. And so we tell people, take your shoes off, put your back against the wall, put on the song Rock Lobster by the B-52s, which is 180 beats per minute. And then I wish I kept my finger. There we go. And then this is it. That's it. So you can see she's got the phone in her hand playing Rock Lobster. Her shoes are off. Her back's against the wall. What you see is, when your back is against the wall, you can't kick back because you'll kick the wall. You can't overstride because you'll move away from the wall. And the wall actually acts as a nice little reminder for your back posture. It helps you stand up straight. And when you're running barefoot, you can't heel strike because it's impossible. You'd be like pogoing around like a pirate with a wooden leg, So you land on the ball of your foot, and the Rock Lobster gets you landing at the right cadence.
Yeah, and that translates, because now we're dealing neuromuscularly. We're turning the circuit on, where so many people just kind of continue to focus on learning more. We've got to switch that light bulb on, and that can be very potent and very powerful and happen pretty quickly.
Yeah. And that's the thing about it too, is that once you get that neuromuscular wiring focused,
did you just say something coaching? Did you use a coaching term?
You see how I struggle?
I've won.
You see how I struggle? I struggle with it so much. I actually lost. I forgot what I was actually saying. If you get that neuromuscularly wiring, I'm struggling too much. That was kind of the fun back and forth about this book. And I'm not sure in the end if we got the balance right, because I'm such a whiny baby about stuff that, you would give me 15 exercises. I'm like, no, it's too many. 2. We'd settle on 3. Maybe it should have been 7 or 8. Maybe I'm wrong. And in the language, I kept trying to homogenize the language out of coaching speak into, normal South Philly Jaboni talk. That maybe I went too far, but I don't know. I just
You asked me in a previous event we had of how much I knew way back in the day. I'd said I work from an umbrella of a philosophy, and one of the components of that umbrella is keeping things simple and potent.
Yeah.
And I think that was my check and balance, was you making sure I kept things simple and potent. And simple doesn't mean it's not potent. And even though I think I disagree with you. I think stripping things back and forcing me to strip things back, I tend to want to throw too much sometimes, and keeping things simple, but very, very potent was the right call. And once people dive in, they'll see how potent it is.
Yeah. When it's in a language that immediately impacts them. But it's funny. So today I was reviewing lots of video footage of our session with Rich Rawl. And I'm sure a lot of people know Rich Rawl is a very well-known fitness and wellness podcaster. Wrote a really good book called Finding Ultra, about his own transformation from a substance abusing, out of shape guy that was heading toward an early grave, and turning it around and turning himself into an extraordinarily fit and knowledgeable ultramarathon athlete. But it was funny to see. So he's having problems. Like, his running form is actually degenerated, and he was struggling with it. When you 2 guys, when you were consulting with him, I videotaped a lot of the conversation, and the language you 2 guys were talking, like, you 2 guys were speaking Martian. and it was all that kind of physiological stuff back and forth. I'm like, I don't know, I need a Google Translate for this. So it's kind of funny when you two like knowledgeable coachy guys lock into your own bubble, man, you leave the rest of humanity behind.
Well, and I think that's where this was a good collaboration because, you kept me honest with going too far to coaching geeky talk, and maybe I did a little bit of swung it in my direction a little bit from what you would normally have done on your own.
Yeah, but it's good. I think that hopefully I became your best audience because, if I didn't understand it and it didn't immediately make sense to me, I could question you about it. And I think I do come at it, like our starting point was, I am the proxy for a lot of the readers. And so if I don't get it, doesn't seem cool to me. If you give me an exercise, I'm like, oh, dude, I don't want to do that. That sounds boring, The readers would feel the same way. And so you were able to customize because you got this endless bag of tricks. You got a million freaking exercises. So if I say that one's boring, well, you pull out another one. Like, oh, this one's cool. I dig this one.
Yeah. And I think that's also speaks to it's not so much about teaching people, but it's giving them something simple to execute so they can go back to that feeling and experience it for themselves. And that's the true coaching.
Yeah. And the thing about it too is the dirty little secret, I think, about really healthy running is it's not complicated at all. And the exercises, I think people keep trying to ramp up the exercises, be on a Bosu ball with, with a medicine ball on your shoulder and a stick in your left hand. No, you just take off your shoes in your kitchen while you're waiting for coffee and balance on one foot, balance on your forefoot on one leg. Just do that. And it's life-changing and it's simple, but nobody does it.
Well, and I think too, the powerfulness of the program itself is the program itself. It's not, they're not individual pillars. Everything's meant to work together. Whereas not to bag on trainers out there or social media out there, but the problem I see is that people just wanting to get content out there. There's no big philosophy of what they're putting out there and why they're putting it out there. It's just another exercise to do. Whereas this takes all the guesswork out of it, and it's one system that feeds into everything.
Yeah, it's funny because you opened my eyes to that when we were doing a tour back in September, and we were in a gym, and a extraordinarily credentialed and successful running coach started to do a certain exercise. And I loved it. I thought it was really cool. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and now I do. I was like, whoa, we're okay. Now I know.
Yeah. And I liked it. And I was giving you a hard time because you actually weren't good at it. It was like a dance thing. And it kind of wasn't your jam. I was like, oh yeah, Eric, he doesn't like this one because he sucks at it. He's bad at it. And you started to get a little bit testy. And I thought it was a personal thing because, usually you're so much better at all the exercises than I am. And this little kind of one thing, I'm pretty good at it. Eric's not so good. But then you point out afterwards, like, what's this supposed to accomplish? It looks cool. It looks flashy. It's fun, but what does it actually do? And he goes, but coaches are always doing it because it's the thing they do. And you sort of open my eyes to the fact of like, just because it looks a certain way, ask yourself the question, what benefit is it actually providing?
Right. And, to your point, we only have so much time, right? So, you've got to really get very, very specific and very, very targeted for what people really, really need. And I would bet all of the exercises and skills in this book, nobody's doing, but everybody should be doing. And that for me is the exciting thing, is that these are going to be so different and so new as a whole system for people that are going to, really help them skyrocket their running.
I think one big benefit is that we have such a wide array of experiences from other activities that we could draw on. For me, when I was working on Natural Born Heroes, it plunged me into the world of parkour.
Right.
And it opened my eyes to these movement snacks. And so, you see a bunch of parkour athletes, they have zero margin for error. If you're doing a backflip off of a moving truck or something, you got to kind of nail it. You got to be pretty well warmed up or you're dead. And so when I would see parkour athletes warm up, they were not doing these stretches. They're not leaning against the wall and stretching the hamstring. They're not pulling their foot behind their butt. They're doing these cool action movement warm-ups. And one of them is one we do, the bear crawl. We call it the parkour hello. So parkour athletes will get in a circle, and then they'll walk on their hands and feet like grizzly bears. And they'll all converge on the middle of the circle, and they'll all high five and shake hands. And then they'll walk backwards again. They'll reverse that quadrupedal movement. And then they stand up. Well, they've activated everything, the entire chain of movement, their right and left. They've learned how to sequence their arms properly to run. Then when they stand up to run, they're ready to go. It's so much more effective than every other static stretching out there.
And what was really cool is that those movement snacks became another purpose for, we're using a lot of the movement snacks to diagnose and help as a remedy for all the injury sections in the end of the book. So yeah, they kind of serve two purposes that worked really, really nicely.
Yeah.
So
hey, Rachel.
Hi, we've got some audience questions that have been coming in, and audience members, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. And I think David is going to ask the first question that we got.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been absolutely fascinating. Our first question is an anonymous attendee, and they ask, what are the most common mistakes that experienced runners make that lead to injury?
Oh, that's, as a general statement, that's an easy one, and it's overstriding. Just the simple, and think about, a lot of times people have the mindset that they want to reach out in front of them to get their speed or get their distance per stride, where it's the other leg. So to answer the question, overstriding by and far leads to most of the dysfunction that we as runners kind of have known to come about, whether it's tight IT band, tight hip flexors, glute amnesia, Achilles, all of that really kind of stems back to overstriding, where we're spending more time on the ground.
I just want to draw attention to that phrase he used, glute amnesia.
Yes.
You got a forgetful butt.
It's not working.
I want to give an example. So you can see this woman right here. This is our friend Iman, right? You only have to look at Iman for a nanosecond to realize that there is no universe where I am a better athlete than Iman. Iman is so much better at me at running in every way, except for one. Iman cannot run downhill. And we saw this during our photo shoot. We were out on a trail run. And again, she's just wafting by me, leaving me behind, like she's like a vapor flying by. And then we get to a long downhill, and Iman is struggling to run down the hill, where I would just, let gravity pull my gluteful amnesiac ass down the hill. And the reason why is because Iman is a classic overstrider. She runs with her leg pointing out, looking for the place to plant her foot, as opposed to keeping that sort of knee bent and ready to piston up and down. And again, it's a funny thing for me to see, not being nearly as experienced as Eric or nearly as good a runner as Iman, but being able to understand, boy, she's overstriding and it's really costing her.
Interesting. Thank you so much.
Sure.
The next question came in from Steve, wanting to know, did anything surprise you about the reception of your first book?
Yeah, so I guess that's for me with Born to Run. Yeah, I think the big surprise was the fact that anybody cared about running shoes. That was a chapter that I came that close to taking it out of the book. I kept putting it in and taking it back out again. So in the various drafts that went to my editor, I would send him a draft without the chapter, and then maybe I should put it back in. And the reason why was because when you start to absorb the accumulated evidence out there about how running shoes have become way overstructured and overly cushioned, and how detrimental it is, and also how little science there is behind the creation of these shoes. You read enough of that stuff, it just seems so obvious that you assume, well, everybody must know this by now. And then, so I thought, okay, this must be common knowledge, because I was also living inside the bubble where I'm talking to Barefoot Ted all the time, and Eric. I forget that 99% of the population is not actually getting this info. And as part of the narrative, I felt it kind of hit the brakes. Like, I'm not a science kind of research study kind of guy. So I went action. This is the one chapter, like, there's nothing going on here. It's just a bunch of eggheads talking about running shoes. So, and I thought, maybe I should just stick it in just in case. And it surprised me that was the chapter that people really latched onto.
Thank you. Rebecca has a question. She wants to know, how do you condition your feet to barefoot run?
Oh, that's simple but potent way is simply just take your shoes and socks off and balance on your forefoot on one foot. And, you know, it's again, it goes back to that simple but really, really potent, is that you'll not only see how much your foot has to work to stabilize, regardless of form. Every step we take, our foot is challenged in that position. So we can start to strengthen our feet just simply by balancing barefoot on our forefoot, and build. We can train our feet. We call it in the book our foot core. We know about training our core, but what about our foot core? Nobody trains the feet, and we have muscles at the bottom of our feet that we can train. And that's probably the most profound type of strength that we can have as runners.
You know, my wife had a simple genius remedy,
Yeah.
because again, you know, the goal is not to run barefoot. The goal is that you have these wonderful apparatus at the end of your legs. They're really useful, and use them. Use them as a way of propelling your running in a way that's satisfying. So what my wife did was she would just start her normal run carrying her shoes in her hand. And the second she felt any discomfort, you know, whether there's a little bit of a blister or abrasion or her calf, whatever it was, she put her shoes on and then continued her run with her shoes on. And what happened very quickly over time is she went from going 25 yards barefoot to 50 to a half mile to a mile. And that was it. But letting the pain tell her, okay, it's time to back off now and do something else.
And I'll add too, is that so much focus is placed on what we do or what we wear when we run. But I would argue that it's just as important what we're doing the other 22 hours out of the day. So
Yeah.
look to go barefoot as much as possible throughout your day. And if you can't go barefoot, find a very minimal shoe that you can wear to work. Every step is going to be now a form of strength training that you can do throughout your day.
That's a really good tip. Thank you. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time, but thank you both so much for taking the time to talk with us tonight. This has been fascinating, a really wonderful evening. And Chris, it's great to see you again after that lovely event in Saratoga so long ago. Hopefully in person again one day. But thank you both. Audience, you can find Born to Run 2 at northshire.com. You can order it there and find a list of our other upcoming events there as well.
Thanks,
Excellent.
everyone.
Thanks for having us on.
I'm sending you guys those signed book plates today, so I hope you'll have them by the weekend.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you. We will include those with books. So order away, everybody.
All right.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.